Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And well, the new expansion has just been announced. To be honest, a little bit of an underwhelming video from CCP where we only really saw the placeholder, I think, graphics and sounds for the moon mining activity. But I think that we can keep that in perspective. Basically, while sure other games will have different dev teams, I do think that with the launch of Spark, and then in September they have the expansion for Valkyrie, and then in October already, 24th of October, EVE Online Lifeblood is coming, so that's gonna be our winter expansion before the winter. I can imagine that certain teams like marketing, like also server infrastructure and things like that are actually not different teams for different games, or not completely, and as a result CCP may have been caught a little bit off guard with their promise to announce more stuff in August, and well, they never really got to that, so they basically just did a quick video for the announcement, for the teaser of the new expansion, which is EVE Online Lifeblood, coming October 24th. That's a little bit earlier than what I expected personally. That does mean that I'm going to go a little bit into crunch mode to get ready for that expansion, because I am still absolutely planning now to move to Galente Space. What is convincing me is that they're adding this PvE feature where you're basically helping the empire of your choice, and for Co-Incorporated it only makes sense that they are going to actively try to help the Galente rather than the Amar. So yeah, October 24th, that is when the facilities in Dital will probably start to go down. I think it's like a 1 week timer, and then I am moving back to Iona, back to Galente Space for this expansion. Lifeblood, bit of a strange name, doesn't really roll off the tongue. I think the biggest problem with it is that it's actually 2 words, right? Citadel, that's 1 word. Ascension, that's 1 word. Lifeblood, it's 2 words, and so it feels a little strange for an expansion name, but that's what we got, and that's what we're getting on October 24th. I am looking forward to it. I'm curious to see what CCP is going to bring there. And of course we also have Valkyrie in September, which I'll definitely at least take a good look at. But we are here for the market, so let's get started. Let's go for the plex. That's gonna be at 250. There we go, and let's take a look at that. So up a little bit. This is in Jeddah, just above 3 million ISK, the bars just below 3 million ISK. And then if we take a look at the surrounding systems, you can see that the sellers are still at 3 million ISK, just above that. In perimeter, the new I Choose You trade hub, I think, that was actually taken down, and the buyers are just below 3 million ISK, but it's really very close, extremely thin margin. And we can see here basically that we are stabilizing at around the 3 million price for plex. That's still 1.5 billion ISK for 30 days game time, but it's quite interesting to see that we're basically flat here. And I was expecting more of a late November, maybe early December expansion. So as a result, yeah, 24th of October, maybe if a speculative bubble is gonna happen, it could go very quickly at this point. If it doesn't, then we might go flat and we might actually start to go down after the expansion. The big question is, will CCP be able to somehow create extra or more supply and more incentive for players to buy plex with the expansion? After the expansion, not too much of a problem there, I think, because then of course we've got the holidays, we'll have plex sales, we've got EVE Vegas coming as well, so we'll have more sales there. It's gonna be quite interesting to see what plex is gonna do. I think after the expansion there's a good chance for an actual pullback, and maybe we'll be on the lookout for a good buy opportunity. And so here 3 million at the announcement of the expansion is basically gonna be our baseline to see what happens in the upcoming weeks towards the expansion, and then after the expansion as well. For the multiple pilot training certificate, that one is going up quite nicely to like 1.45 billion, I think, exactly 1.45 billion, and a little bit above that for the below that, of course, a little bit above 1.4 billion for the buyers. And makes a lot of sense with plex at basically 1.5 billion for 30 days game time. Although I do think that this will add a little bit of upwards pressure. Sorry, here is Plex chart on Plex as well, because it's a pretty high price here. But the volumes, of course, are pretty low as well, like maybe 30 a day. So that's just not big enough a market to have a massive influence on Plex themselves. Now, when it comes to the skill extractors, of course, very close pattern to Plex prices. What's interesting here, we've got these median daily prices are actually still below the 5-day moving average. 5-day moving average still below 20-day moving average. So there does still seem to be some downward pressure when it comes to the skill extractors. These are currently being sold for 337 million ISK, and then the buyers are at 336. Again, that extremely narrow margin, something that we've definitely not seen very often. Especially on the increasing prices. Also for Plex, we usually have decently large margins, even when it comes to the difference between the buyers and the sellers within a player-owned trade hub. But here, nope, very narrow. And so basically, both sellers and buyers are meeting each other here at the 3 million mark and at the 335 million mark, pretty much around that, for the skill extractors. Very interesting to see this, and I do wonder what the announcement is going to do to all of this. If CCP can build up hype from this point on, maybe we will see some sort of an increased demand and more prices, higher prices for Plex, maybe creating a bit of a bubble, which is the usual pattern. But because of this early expansion, I'm just not sure. Also, Valkyrie, I have to be honest, is probably a bit of a wild card when it comes to the Plex market. The reason for that is, well, it's another CCP game. If it comes on the launcher, you might start to see some interaction, some possibilities with Plex there as well. And so as a result, maybe people will be more eager to buy Plex, or let's hope not, that there will be other ways to spend Plex as well. If you don't want to see higher prices, that's not something you want to see. But yep, with Valkyrie coming to the PC, there may be some sort of interaction when it comes to Plex purchases there as well. And let's see, large scale injectors. Yeah, let's move on to those next. Those are also basically flatlining here, although on a bit of a higher note. And these large scale injectors are currently being sold for 776 million ISK, and the buyers are up to 765 million ISK. So once again, an extremely narrow margin in the Plex market and the Plex related market. That's definitely something that you should notice this week. And it's very difficult for me personally to say which way we're going from this. Because of the announcement of the expansion being so close now. That is something that I think people were not expecting, and so the market will need to make a decision on this. And I personally think it could go either way. And by either way, I mean maybe probably like flat prices towards the expansion, and then maybe lower prices, or just a bit of a bubble, a bit of an overreaction to the nearness of the expansion, I think is a possibility as well. But for now, a lot of soft hesitation, so pretty much flat prices, very small percentage differences, and extremely narrow margin between the sellers and the buyers. Just 10 million on what is probably, except for the training certificate, the most expensive item here. Is definitely a tiny little margin. The small skill injector finally also pretty much flat here. Quite interesting to see again here the median daily prices going down a little bit, and in fact touching the 5-day moving average. That could be dangerous. 157 million for the sellers, 153 million for the buyers. Again, a very, very narrow margin. And then the question will be, who is going to win out? Just a bit more supply can definitely crash the price down, but a bit more demand can also push the price back up very quickly. So very interesting situation in the Plex market, and depending on your view of the future, this could actually be an incredible time to buy as well. If you look at the Plex chart here, we're at 3 million. You can still get your Plex for around 3 million. This may be the time to make that investment if it's the gamble you want to take. And otherwise, well, because of that hesitation, who knows, perhaps a better buy opportunity could show up, but that would then be very likely to only be seen after the expansion, I think. So pretty interesting, pretty damn interesting. Let's move on to some minerals next at, well, 950. There we go. As always, we will start with titanium, and titanium is at 6 ISK. You probably have already seen that from the ticker. And yeah, still continuing its climb. 5-day moving average, staying above 20-day moving average. Median daily prices slowly going back up there. But this is definitely not bad. If we put out the filter, 609 for the sellers, and then the buyers are coming in at 594. Again, really pretty tiny margin, but 6 ISK. The price for titanium. Very good news, I think, because this is definitely back in line with titanium prices from before Ascension, from before the Rorcal changes, mining changes, and things like that. A very good opportunity. If you're looking to unload titanium, I think you won't be alone. So there will be a lot of competition to try and unload your the titanium at this point on the market, but you can definitely, I think, do so. More than 6 ISK. You've had such a very long opportunity to buy cheaper ISK here, let's say from February up until June. You could have easily picked up titanium for less than 5 ISK, and so now if you can get rid of all of that above 6, that's definitely not a bad price, and so you could consider that. I don't think it would be a bad idea. Next up here we get pyrite. That's one of the reasons why I think it's not such a bad idea. You can see that pyrite is still hesitating here. 5-day moving average going back down a little bit, and we're staying just above 6 ISK, but very close to the titanium prices. In fact, 608 for the sellers, 597 for the buyers. That is pretty much the exact same price as titanium, which means that, in my opinion, titanium might be going down at some point, unless, of course, more war activity happens. That is, yeah, again, something that is coming sooner than expected. Normally, with the winter expansion, unless they're keeping that for a later patch, we'll also see the transition from the Nosek outposts into those faction citadels. So again, possibly a content driver in Nosek as well, which could be very good news for the minerals. So that, depending on, again, which way you think will be going, pyrite could actually be the right investment. If that one comes back in line with titanium prices, which are back at pre-ascension prices, then of course pyrite still has to go from 6 to 9 ISK. So those are the two possibilities. Personally, at the moment, I wouldn't blame you if you're selling your titanium, but keep an eye on pyrite as well. And of course, for that, I think we'll need to keep an eye on general Nosek activity. Next up, we've got Mexalon also going down a little bit after again reaching the 1-year high of 80 ISK. That's not that surprising. Mexalon is still selling for 77 ISK, I'm gonna say, because that one order is gonna get snagged up pretty quickly by the market. But 77 ISK for the sellers, 73 ISK for the buyers of Mexalon. Again, decently narrow margin here, just a couple ISK down from the high of around 80 ISK, and still not a bad price for Mexalon, not at all. Still your focus if you're mining at the moment, especially in high sec, you want to focus on Mexalon sources, because selling that to the market is pretty much a no-brainer at this point still, compared to anything else. Titanium as well, you might definitely be able to sell that, but pyrite and isogen, no. So these are your focus on these minerals. Mexalon and titanium should definitely be your focus when you're mining at the moment for high-sec minerals. Next up here we've got isogen trying to go up a little bit, so that's good news. We had one day where we reached 57 ISK on a little bit of extra volume, so that is a bit more demand. This again could go either way. It could be more war preparations, more actual demand in all likeliness from Nosek then, or it's also possible that it's an investor that tried to take advantage of the 51 ISK downward trend here and said, alright, I'm actually gonna build up a stock of isogen, because if it does come out that we'll have more action somehow in Nosek and we'll have a bit more of a squeeze on minerals, then that does mean that isogen should normalize compared to Megasite, which means that it has quite a bit of an upwards potential right here, again from 50 to 90 and even higher if you compare it to Mexalon. Then that's definitely not bad of a potential. So isogen currently selling for 54 ISK and the buyers. First one coming in at 51 ISK, maybe not good, very representative. 50 ISK is where the actual competition seems to start for the buyers of isogen. up a little bit, but still a very timid increase in price in Isogen. Next up we have Noxium. We saw last week that Noxium did really well to get back above 400 ISK, came very close to pre-ascension prices again, and now is slowly having to give back ground here. 398 on average means that the sellers are at 400 ISK and the buyers are at 395 ISK. The bad news, of course, we had to give ground, and this is another indication that the upwards momentum because of the lower activity in nullsec is probably stalling at this point. The good news is that the buyers are up to 395 and they're still coming in with 2 million, 4.4 million, 6 million. That is not so bad. That is apparently more than the suppliers. And as a result, 400 ISK seems to be defensible by the market, which is good because we've been below 300 ISK and very close to that before, and not that long ago here, early August, going as low as 320. So very good news for Noxium, staying at 400 ISK and seemingly having a market consensus, again very narrow margin between the sellers and the buyers, but that market consensus is at a reasonable price compared to the Ascension expansion price. So that one is good news. The bad news is of course here that we have to give ground, and that seemingly nullsec is lowering its demands and going back into production mode or blue donut mode, whatever you want to call it. Although, yep, CO2 test, all of that, there is still some action out there. It's really the Imperium is so large that it really does make them a mover when it comes to the entire economy of the game. So that is pretty impressive to see, actually. Next up we've got the nullsec minerals. So let's start with Zydrine. After a very sharp increase up to 1200, it's also normal that we have to give back ground a little bit, but we're sharply going back to 1100, so 1128 for the sellers and 1100, but that's not actually in range, so a little bit less than 1100 for the buyers. Quite a sharp decrease in price here, so you had one clear sell opportunity last week at around 1200 ISK for Zydrine. Again, with the lower amount of violence in nullsec, it's actually normal if the supply routes come back online that you see this drop off because of more supply from nullsec in these minerals. Megasite basically hesitating at this point. Median daily prices did go as high as 1450 and currently back down to 1300, something like that. So 1360 for the sellers and 1346 ISK, no, 1271 ISK for the buyers of Megasite. So again, also giving a little bit of ground, which is normal in a nullsec minerals because of the lower war activity in nullsec. So this is pretty much in line with each other, definitely still quite normal. 1360 ISK for the sellers of Megasite, and when it comes to Zydrine, 1128 ISK. This is an okay margin between those two as well. All of that does feel decently normal and natural when it comes to nullsec minerals. Let's finally take a look at Morphite. That is managing to stay quite high, 12,000 ISK for the sellers and 10,571 for the buyers. That is not bad for all the guys that, like me, have been building up their stocks whenever you could like buy Morphite for less than 8,000 ISK, and when you saw prices be below 10,000 ISK. So I sold mine off, I think a little bit early, 11,500, something like that, I think was my sell order. All of that has been picked up, so if you still have some Morphite lying around that you bought during this below 10,000 ISK period here, then you can definitely make some very nice profits on selling at the moment. I do think, because it's also coming from nullsec, it's also a mineral. If we look at Zydrine, if we look at Megasite, this won't last forever. So if you have Morphite to sell, try to do so now, because fresh supplies will be coming in at these prices, and it will be a focus on nullsec at the moment, which might give us a little bit of a breather, or it might also explain the margin between, let's say, average prices of 1000 to 1100 on Zydrine and on Megasite as well, that we're a bit above average, because maybe they're focusing a bit more on their Morphite at the moment. But I do expect that gap here will be plugged very quickly. The good news is that, while Morphite can stay below 10,000 is for quite a while, at some point when violence comes to nullsec, when some speculation moves in here, you do see Morphite has that potential of making you a cool 20 and even 40% at this point from 8,000 at its bottom price, decently reliably. So this is twice in the last year that we see this pattern. Not so bad. Let's move on to some PI then at 2010. There we go. We'll start with construction blocks, and these are, let's take a look here, back up in price. That's quite surprising, in fact, reaching almost 14,000 ISK here. So that's not bad. Higher volumes as well. Our buy opportunities, they don't seem to be forming when it comes to PI. So 13,850 ISK for the sellers, 13,245 for the buyers. We've got decent supply coming in, but demand is also pretty strong here on the volumes: 46,000, 26,000, and 50,000 for the sellers. So okay, almost 14,000 for construction blocks, back up quite sharply. Interesting. Consumer electronics are still staying pretty high at around 15,000 ISK. Apparently the market is willing to defend that price. 14,900 pretty much for the sellers and 14,700 for the buyers. Quite a narrow margin here between those two, and what you should probably notice here, 89,000 for the buyers, 200,000 for the buyers, 48,000 for the buyers. They're definitely winning out. There seems to be higher demand than supply for consumer electronics, despite these well above average prices. So last week it was looking like some of them wanted to go back down, wanted to create a buy opportunity, and now, nope, construction blocks, a big no here, all the way back up, and consumer electronics, extremely strong demand to be seen here. Coolants next, those are trying at least, so back down below the 20-day moving average at around 12,400, 13,250 for the sellers, 12,300 for the buyers. I would say that the sellers are still a bit above average, not by too much, and the buyers are a little bit, yeah, a tiny bit above average, but not by much anymore either. So I think we'll have to make a difference between stuff that's used in the new refineries and in the construction of structures and stuff that's going to be fuel related. I think there's a hesitation there. So coolants, next up we get enriched uranium, although still decently high and also up from last week. Enriched uranium selling for 16,000 ISK, definitely above average, 15,000 for the buyers. I would say that that's above average as well. It is a bit different from coolants because it's a bit harder to produce, although it is also fuel related and not following the pattern that I was thinking of. Integrity response drones, that's not gonna be good, no. So you can see massive increase in volume and an increase in price up to 3 million ISK, 3.8 million for the sellers. So yeah, preparation. Basically, I think here the PI market got caught off guard a little bit by the soonness of the expansion. As a result, lots of people scrambling for all of this PI, and basically you're too late if you still need to make a lot of preparations when it comes to purchases for your structures, because 3.8 million for integrity response drones, almost empty of those. So obviously people came in massively at the announcement of the expansion here, and integrity response drones hugely up in price all of a sudden. Mechanical parts, what are they doing? They are staying above average for sure, but pretty much flat here. So this fuel related again, 13,000 for the sellers, that's above average, 12,800 for the buyers, that is also above average. Not by a huge margin, but definitely well above average. Nuclear reactors next, also staying at their current price range, so 117,000 for the sellers, 110 for the buyers. I would say a bit above average as well. And quite interestingly here, basically hesitating. I was hoping that we would see this pullback that you could see here that started last week to continue downward, creating another buy opportunity. But I guess the announcement of the expansion caused increased demand for integrity response drones, and as a result, across the board, the entire PI market is saying, all right, you know what, we're not going to go too low with this anymore. It does look like we're in high demand situations here. Oxygen next, also back up above 500 ISK. Again, I would have liked to see this continue to a buy opportunity, just not happening. So 520 basically for the sellers, except for one decently large one coming in, and 486 for the buyers. Well, if you're going for 486.40 and the buyers are at 486.37, you're better off just going for immediate, because you're saving on taxes. So this one sell order makes virtually no sense, but all right, someone made it. And we're back up significantly for oxygen as well. Robotics, after going back up to well above 110,000 is now recovering a little bit from that, currently selling for 108,000 and 102 for the buyers. I would say above average, but it is possible that this one is really close to its new average here of around 100,000 ISK. I wouldn't be surprised by that, especially on the buyers. And then rocket fuel taking off. Whoa, taking off quite sharply here. Look at that, almost 17,000 ISK. But at the moment, 14,900 for the sellers, 13,800 for the buyers. So rocket fuel taking off, and this again here, mid-July seemed to have been our buy opportunity. That would have been pretty good, 10,000 ISK on the buyer side, and now almost 15,000 ISK. So 50% increase in price here, not bad in a matter of a few months. So this is definitely again a lesson that we need to learn, that timing, that daring to call the buy opportunity. I definitely think that I called this one because it was very noticeable compared to the entire chart, but I didn't expect early September here to already be a sell opportunity all of a sudden. And I think it is, of course, because of the announcement by CCP. Again, self-harmonizing power cores, we can see the increased volumes. Average price is doing okay compared to that, but these are currently selling for 2.8 million and the buyers are at almost 2.6 million. So that is definitely heading in this direction right here compared to Ascension. Also, we can see these higher prices. So unfortunately, again here early July, 2 million would have been our buy opportunity for the self-harmonizing power cores. Superconductors also going back up nicely towards 15,000 ISK, which is something that I'm producing. 16,000 for the sellers, 15,100 for the buyers. So that increase in price here is almost unstoppable because of the increased demand, of course. And then test cultures are saying, nope, we are not going anywhere. They are still being sold for less than 9,000 ISK and the buyers are at 8,000. So that's unfortunate because this is one gamble that I did take, and I'll need even more patience for test cultures. And finally, we have wetware mainframes, bit less in volumes, right? You're seeing this a little bit less here, but they're still being sold for 2.7 million and the buyers are at 2.4 million ISK. So you could still pick up some decently cheap wetware mainframes, but quite a few of the others are definitely at very high prices already because of the announcement and probably the deployment of the refineries on CC, giving us an idea of what it'll take to actually produce those. Interesting times in the PI market. Unfortunately, looks like June, July was our buy opportunity, and so that one is now, unfortunately, I don't think that one is coming back here. I don't think we'll spot another buy opportunity before the expansion anymore. So we need to take bigger gambles if we actually want to still try and make some money in this market. Next up, we have the Tech 1 chips at 2820. And there we go. Let's go over these. Here is the Abaddon, showing the pattern right last week. Pretty good, went up to 230 million at one point, but that gap is plugged very quickly. 185 million for the sellers, 174.5 for the buyers. Still a pretty good price when it comes to battleships. Apparently these are being flown in Nullsec from time to time as well, especially to bash citadels. That's from what I've seen. So I guess with lasers that does make sense. No need for ammo or anything like that. Just anchor up and start firing. So if you have control of the field, grabbing something like Abaddons to bash a structure makes a lot of sense. But yeah, increased demand during the war, and now of course we're actually trailing back off on increased supplies. The Caracal last week went up to 11 million, which was not bad, but again you can see a week later here we're already dropping back to 10 million, 10.5 for the sellers, 9.4 for the buyers. A bit slower than I expected, but they are starting to come in 67, 30 here, from 11 to 10.7 to 10.6, 10.5, which is where competition is at now. And I do think if a big supplier comes in with a couple dozen more, they'll start to cut them down towards 10 million very quickly. So this is the expected pattern showing up in the Caracal markets, heading back for 10 million. The Coveter is going up. That's quite interesting. 32 million for the sellers, 24.9 million for the buyers. This could actually be expansion related. We know that basically CCP will provide us some type of content that will allow us to help the empires out, whether by mining or by flying combat ships, but that the focus, the meaning of Lifeblood on the expansion is going to be resource gathering, I think, and so we'll see more competition from the pirates. It's going to be pretty interesting, I think, especially if they can then escalate that to maybe more aggressive and more powerful pirates in Nullsec, actually helping that to force some more Nullsec activity and some more Nullsec preparations as well, not just against other players, maybe against the NPCs as well. I think in preparation for that, someone came in, bought some Coveters, just thinking to make some money on that expansion. That is definitely a possibility here. Pretty sharp increase in the Coveter price because we're running out of them. Next up here we got the Ferox. So here again with the war, increased volumes, massively increased price up to 65 million ISK, but we're back down 52.5 for the sellers, 46 million for the buyers. Decently cheap Feroxes at the moment again. The Hurricane, also a little bit of a double increase in price, but look where we are now. 45 million on average, 47 for the sellers, 42.7 for the buyers. And again here in the last couple of days you can see 10, 6, 10, 13, 100, and then we're going down from 54.5 straight down to 51, straight down to 50, and then now 47 million. Someone said that floor, and so just fresh supply keeps coming in here until we reach almost unsustainable prices again. So the Hurricane almost coming into an interesting territory. If someone wants to pick up some below 50 million, well, we need some more supply, but it's undoubtedly coming. Next up here we got the Maelstrom, actually back up in price a little bit, going for 185 million for the sellers, 171 for the buyers. Next up we got the Prophecy, decently flat, not much to say here, 52.7 for the sellers and 48 for the buyers of Prophecies, hovering just above that 50 million ISK, a little bit above average, so not bad. There must be some demand for Prophecies at the moment, but not all that great either, of course. Very flat and stable chart here. Next up we got the Scythe. Here again, yeah, I think that this is flown in Nullsec from time to time, so although we don't see that much on the volumes, we did go up to almost 10 million, which for a cruiser is pretty cheap, but for the Scythe is not so bad. And then we very quickly go back down, and so here again we'll see that fresh supply in the last couple of days going from 9.2 million, 9.1 million, 9 million, and another 20, another 30 coming in, and then we're coming in at 8.8 million, 8.5 million, and that's where we are competing at the moment amongst the sellers. So still a little bit up. I think more supply will come in to crash that price though. Next up here we get the Typhoon. This is something that happens as well, especially when the price goes up quite substantially from 150 up to more than 200 million on the war action. Well, people tend to overreact to that. More supply coming in than the market can absorb after this, and so now the Typhoon is down to 144 million for the sellers, 130 million for the buyers. I would not be surprised if there is some more violence coming on the price front of the Typhoons, because since it is in Imperium doctrine, if the Imperium is still maintaining that, I would not be surprised that they buy up another fleet below like 150 or yeah, grab basically everything here, and then the price would immediately shoot up towards 160 on the seller side of things. And considering this chart, it would make a lot of sense to move in, because everything that you're buying here on this lower end is very cheap at the moment because it's massively oversupplied, and there's still 47 here and 23 here. So I think that the Imperium might just snag up some typhoons, increase the price once again. So some volatility is basically possible when we're oversupplied like this here. Next up, we've got the Vixor actually going up in price a little bit, up to 11 million. So 11 million for the sellers, 9.6 for the buyers. I think that some of this will be tied to the announcement of the expansion again, where CCP is going to rebalance some alpha clone ships to make them more viable in PvP and more likely to be flown. So it's difficult to say which ships those are going to be. CCP Rise also spoke about doing rebalancing efforts in the new focus for his team. So there is definitely some ship rebalancing that's going to happen that might create some opportunities. Gambling on what they'll do beforehand is of course what you would need to do in order to actually get some money. And so on the announcement of the expansion, it's alpha clone ships that might see some actual rebalancing and thus some price increases there. Some opportunities to trade might exist there. That could be why the Vixor is coming out of its slumber, maintain a price of just above 10 million for several months on end here, and all of a sudden shooting up to 11 million. That may just be on expectations of these rebalancing rounds, but personally I don't think it's going to be for the Vixor. If there's one ship that an alpha clone can fly that does its job really well, I think it would be the Vixor. Next up, we've got the Tech 2 ships. That's at 35.55. There we go. So with the war winding down, and during the war we saw a lot of these, especially the interceptors and the stealth bombers, shoot up quite a lot. I think we're basically going to look into stabilization, and at the moment my expectation is that this could become a pretty slow process, because of course in less than 2 months we'll have the new moon mechanics, which could have a massive impact on the Tech 2 production lines as well. And so here this is definitely one where I think that opportunities may arise if it's very easy to disrupt the new moon mining mechanic, and that will somehow decrease supplies of Tech 2 ships. That is definitely possible, but on the other hand, of course, the exact opposite is possible as well. And so I think that the market is going to hesitate to really go to bottoms or to really shoot up very drastically. And this is what we're seeing here for the Ares, currently being sold for 25.6 million. Buyers are at 23.2 million. You can clearly see that it's not the 21 million that we would normally want to look for the buyers, and the sellers are a bit above their average as well. A decently healthy margin here. Basically, I'm expecting us to move in a margin band above the averages of before, but without that much volatility. So next up here is the Claw. 25 million here on average, 25 for the sellers, 24 for the buyers. A little bit less margin here on the Claw, also came from a much higher peak. And again, you know, Claws 20 million is I think what we're looking for that definitive buy opportunity. So I just don't think that we're gonna move towards that anymore at this point. I think that both suppliers and buyers of Tech 2 are gonna keep things in a bit of a wider margin and a healthier price range there. 25 million for the Crow on the sellers, 22.4 for the buyers. The buyers are decently close, but I think we're looking for like 21.5 for the buy orders for that short thing. So trying, but yeah, again, the fact that the sellers are remaining this high, I think is going to keep this decently stable. Next up here we get the Ares. That one went up in price after the war, surprisingly enough. It's now back down to 50 million all of a sudden. 55 for the sellers, 50 million for the buyers. Well, that's actually, again, the buyers above the entire chart here, and then the sellers a bit above that. The Flycatcher next. What is that one doing? Let's take a look at that. Just hovering at 70 million, 71 for the sellers, 62.5 for the buyers, which again, well, actually, nope, that's 62.5. That's, well, yeah, definitely above the average and definitely above where we would like to see a buy opportunity, but not by all that much. So Flycatcher, for some reason, well, there just isn't any supply of it, but the buy orders there well, there's quite a few of them above 62 million, so we'll need to see quite a bit of movement for that one to drop off into a certain buy opportunity. And again, I don't think it's gonna happen before the expansion anymore. Here is the Heretic next, selling for 60 million. Buyers are at 54 million, and you can clearly see that the average that we might be looking for is more like 50 million. Although the last few times that we took off here is at 55 million, but this is again war related, so I don't think it's gonna happen all too soon. The Hound next, here that pattern is clearly visible, so we start off 20 million, great buy opportunity, we go up in price, 35 million, even on the 5-day moving average was possible, so that's definitely not bad, right? 15 million on 20 million purchase, not bad. But here now we're down to 26 million on average, 26 for the sellers, 25.3 for the buyers. You can see that the buyers are willing to pay that premium because of the uncertainty of the expansion, and 20 million on the buyers for another buy opportunity, just not in the cards at the moment. Malediction next, here again, so bottom price is 23 million, massively oversupplied. We can see that from these patterns, but currently being sold for 26, buyers are at 22 million. That's actually not bad. So if you would want to take a gamble, then I would say maybe try to pick up a couple of maledictions. That here the buyers are definitely still pretty low. The Manticore next, that one went up to well above 35 million as well, still selling for 28.6 million, and the buyers at 27 or 26.5 million. Again, Manticore, we do want to see that go lower, like probably around 22.5 or something like that. So we're not there yet. Nemesis next, very same pattern, again went up to above 30 million. Not bad if you manage to pick those up at 20 million, but now the sellers are at 23.5 and the buyers are at 22 million, so we still have quite a ways to go before, and there's actually decent volumes here being bought as well above our 20 million, so it's going to be very tricky to drop back down, although the Nemesis is being massively oversupplied at the moment. Purifier next, again same pattern, nice shot up, but here settling well above the average charts before, 26.8 for the sellers, 23.3 for the buyers. Way too early to make a move on that. And here's a Saber. Alright, this is after the war action in the interdictors. We're out of those, so if you happen to have some Sabers lying around, or you can produce Sabers, definitely a good time to sell them. But yeah, for buying that, definitely not the right time to do so either. So quite interesting to see this Saber chart, very unusual, just because, well, there's none of them. So a great opportunity to try and sell a couple at a very nice premium. Next up, we'll have the Tick 3 ships at 42.10. There we go. Let's take a look at what these are doing. Again, war with the Imperium apparently drying up a little bit in content, and as a result, of course, some of these ships will have to give some ground. So the Confessor, after a high of around 60 million, currently selling for 47.5, and the buyers are at 43 million. Still not bad, definitely a very good price. You could definitely still sell your 30 million Confessors at these prices, but we can see that we had to give back a little bit of ground here because of the lower activity all of a sudden. Next up, the Hecate. That one is only now starting to drop back down, but again went as high as almost 70 million and is currently being sold for 52.8 million, and the buyers are at 46 million. The Jackdaw next, even more extreme pattern showing up, went up to like 110 million ISK, now currently selling again for 52 million, and the buyers are at 47 million. So the good times are over. Your massive sell opportunity for the Jackdaw, where we went from 30 million up to let's say 110 million. Yeah, that's like 3 to 4 times the price. That opportunity is over, unfortunately. Of course, the more violent the upswing, the more violent the downswing as well, and 50 million is still not bad for 30 million Jackdaws, of course. And then we also have the Zwepel that is showing that exact same pattern. Went up to 60 million, is already selling for 42.7 million, and the buyers are at 40 million. So clearly will be under pressure at this point. For the cruisers, here is the Legion charts going back down a little bit, still around 150, 155 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. It is trying to find its price at around 150, I would say, on average. The Loki next, that one is finally dropping off a little bit towards 180, 181 for the sellers, 160 for the buyers, so quite a decently wide margin here. Not that many on the volumes, individual cell volumes right here, so this can still move very quickly. I again do think that we might shoot up a little bit and then back down, but that we're basically trying to find that average for the Loki as well. The Proteus here going back up a little bit, that's quite interesting, up to 140. 140 million for the sellers, 125.5 for the buyers. Definitely not a very strong performer, but up a little bit from last week. And finally we have the Tengu that is also staying at a slightly higher range here towards 160. Not bad. 158 for the sellers, 152.5 for the first buyer, but otherwise it's 145 here, so decently wide margin here again. On the volumes here, this is quite different, several hundred of them coming in at 163. So here for the Tengu, actually still selling at a decently good price, and volumes awaiting at 163 to stop the price from going even higher right there. And finally for the extra product at 45.30, we are going to take a look at the assault frigates. So what happened there is I wrote that down. I actually purchased a couple of those, not a lot. So we actually have advanced frigates and an assault frigates. The reason is that I thought maybe these guys might see some rebalancing as well by the new rebalance team from CCP, because during the stream, I'm not sure if you saw the stream with CCP Guard and CCP Rise, they mentioned that some of the more underused ship classes might see some rebalancing, and so apparently for the expansion it's going to be focused on the alpha clone ships, which makes a lot of sense, of course. If you want them in on the action, they want to give them ships that are quite capable, but I think at some point the assault frigates will be next, because they are, I think, considered one of the most underused classes when it comes to ships in EVE Online. So let's take a quick look at their charts here. Here's the retribution chart, currently being sold for 25 million on average, 27.5 for the sellers, 23.5 for the buyers. Not that much movement to report, and we're basically at an average, high average for the retribution at the moment. Next up here we've got the Vengeance. That is quite interesting. We were actually at a 1-year high up to 30 million. That was sustained a little bit, and we're just out of them when it comes to selling those. And the volumes, let's take a look at that. Yeah, they're basically not being traded. On average you've got maybe 10 to 15 of them being sold, so it's a tiny market that's completely out of the meta at the moment. And if a rebalance does happen and brings these ships back, then I do think that they have a lot of potential. So I just bought a couple. You know, again, don't put all your eggs in one basket, but I did buy for maybe 400 million or something like that in these ships across all races. So not too much, but if a rebalance would come to the assault frigates, I've got a small investment ready that should provide me with some income. Here's the Harpy chart, also going for a 1-year high, because there's almost none of them on the market at 33 million. I think I basically bought those that were not at a 1-year high, so something like some retributions, and then probably, nope, not the Hawks and not the Harpies, so no Kaldari ones I don't think, but amongst Galente and Minmatar I found some decent ones as well. So the Harpy, 1-year high, but again, look at those volumes, they are abysmally small. The Hawk also at a 1-year high, quite interesting, at 34 million, because there is just no supply of these ships at the moment. Here the volumes, it's pretty bad as well, like 20 to 30 a day. And if we go for the Galente ones, here is the Enyo, a little bit above average, but still below 30 million, selling for 30 million. And this is a price that looks decently low, but again, you can see that there's just almost none of them available on the market. Next up here we've got the Ishkar, actually coming down from a high price point. Again, some people that have seen the same stream, although this is a couple days after before that, which is kind of strange. may have made a move on some of those. So 30 million at the high point, currently selling for 28 million, and the buyers are 26 million of the Ishker. And then for the Jaguar here, 25 million on average, 27.6 for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. And then the Wolf is at 30 million again. So because of a lack of supply, there's some Jaguars on the markets pushing the price below 30. Not that many Wolves on the markets keeping the price above 30 million. That's basically the pattern here. Abysmal volumes, but I risked some purchases in these assault frigates myself. Now I just need the patience to wait for CCP to actually rebalance these ships, which may not be anytime soon, but there is hope, I guess, that this might happen. And so the Retribution is actually decently well supplied, and that is what gives us room to go below 30 million ISK on this one. Most of the other ones are at 30 or close to 30 million ISK, especially the Kaldari ones are actually at high 1-year high prices, and that is because there's just none of them on the market at the moment for sale, which is quite strange, but not all that strange if you look at the volumes of these ships, where on average maybe 20 to 25, and some of the worst one, around 10 of them are only being sold every single day. So if there is one class, I would say, that is pretty much out of the meta completely, that may use some CCP love, and that will hopefully be on its radar, I think it's gonna be the assault frigates. And we know that there's a dedicated balance team, so hopefully that happens pretty soon. Anyways, that's going to be it for this EVE talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.